All right, so we're recording, and let me make sure that's not in the way. Okay, we're just going to cover, it's probably going to be a little bit short this time because we're going to cover just a little bit more on drawing on stencils and how to apply it to a quilt, okay? And then next week we start our project, so we're going to do all of the things that we've learned so far, and then we're going to start adding the other features of EQ in. Like, serendipity and array and some of the mosaic features, okay? So this is kind of like our final little thing on drawing, and this is how to do our quilt stencils. And you can see I'm in easy draw right now, right?
Yes.
And I'm just in my blocks right now. I haven't, saved any blocks. I haven't, done anything to my sketchbook. I just basically created a project called Stencils. And, here's my tabs at the bottom. And there's one called Tracing Image. So if I go over to the Tracing Image tab, I get these little picture things here. I have this little lightness scanner bar here or slider bar here. And I have this little Import Image button, this little picture. See the little picture up here with the arrow?
Yeah.
So when I click on that, it's going to let me bring in a few different image formats. You can see it's bitmaps, GIF files, JPEGs, PNG, and TIFF files. Those are the ones that you can bring into the program to trace over. And, there's one of our little applique blocks we played with, and there's my little handsome Levi Meister in a self-sideways portrait for I'm not sure what reason. And this is the, block that we're going to use to create a stencil. Okay, and this is kind of a little bit elaborate, but, you can also draw feathers and different things, which we'll look at doing as we start going through our project. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. And you can see, I can crop my image or, if I want a little space around it. In this case, there's no more space to go around it, but, I could crop it, see? Okay, but I don't necessarily want to crop it. I want to bring it in as it is. Units are pixels, but if you look, it says inches, centimeters, millimeters. If you, really want to set your size, you can go to inches or millimeters, whichever one you're comfortable with. You can see it's telling me it's 3 inches. Let's go ahead and make this, we'll make it 8 inches. Whoops. I guess it's not going to let me take it to 8 that way. So, okay, so that's the size of the image, right? Okay, lightness for tracing, you can make it, as dark as 100%, or, you can go down to about 50 or 60%. It depends on your image, right? Generally, the default's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. And this is where I can click and fit it. Okay, see how faint that is? If it's too faint, this is going to make it more faint. Lightness, making the number higher makes it more faint. Taking it lower makes it less faint. And the reason is that, they're saying, what do you want to do? How much do you want to lighten it? Well, going up to 100% is actually lightening it, okay? So you can slide this and adjust it at any point in time. Position or resize. Inside fit, outside fit, distort fit. These are all going to be fitting things, right? So if you were, maybe doing like a block, you might want to place it in the upper left or, center the image. And you've got these options here. So I'm going to go ahead and just click distort fit. And what it does is it doesn't necessarily distort it. It just fits it into, the size block, okay? So this is our image, and, even after we trace this with our drawing tools, right, we still have the option to resize it. And, right here, where the Customize toolbar is, don't forget to go in and look at Add and Remove buttons, see if there's anything else here. And in this case, there's not, okay? I only have the 3. Import, resize, and crop. All right, so now this is in there. We're at about 19 on this, so I can see it. And I'm going to go over to Easy Draw. And when I go over to Easy Draw, the image is just basically placed as in the background for me to begin to trace. Okay, and I'm going to use these tools to trace. Okay, and This one is, my grid. I can turn the grid, do I want to snap to kind of to the grid, right? This is, my Bezier curve, right, my arcs. These are the straight lines, and this is my reshape. And, here is my, pick the section tool, right? And since we haven't done this for a while, we'll go up here. Here's my graph paper and my number of cells. Here's my snap, right here, my snap to settings, right? And, if I look at these snapping options, I might want to not snap to anything because I'm drawing, right? So here's my snapping options. The first one, snap to grid points on the work table. Maybe, maybe not. Snap to nodes of drawing, definitely. This one we're going to leave off, but we definitely want to snap to the nodes of the drawing because that's what closes our lines up, remember? Snap to lines and arcs of drawing. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and use those settings as well. Okay, now what we have is a series of arcs, and, there's very few straight lines here. Even in the center section, this is really arced around. And if you look, it's kind of like almost a flowery type of arc in here, right? You don't have to follow this. You can do whatever you want with it, but it's good practice on this to do the arcs, because if you look, here's, remember where you draw that point is how it determines how it arcs, remember? So, if you come down here, there's your first arc, right? There's a second arc. There's a third arc. And, it's pretty quick to make these arcs fairly even around here. This one looks like one big giant arc, but I'm going to go ahead and just, make that little lower point. Okay, so there are, my little drawn arc points, right? Mm-hmm. And if I go to select this, I can still select each individual thing. I'm going to kind of zoom in here. Okay, see how these all connect? They're all touching in here. That has to do with these snap to settings right here. Okay, so that's why it's important, because if we didn't have these snap to settings on, and I did these arcs, okay, I'm just going to kind of draw a couple of arcs off to the side. You have to hope that you line up on each one, right? And what ends up happening is, this is a little bit exaggerated, but what ends up happening is, see these, like I'm overlapped here, I'm missing here, I'm overlapped there, right? Because we have the snap to selected, that's not going to happen. So that's why those tools are kind of important. Okay, so we've got our little arc section here in the center. We can edit this. This is looking, fairly even. But the trick on this, because I'll send you guys this images, each one of these thicker sections is what I would use to line up on those arcs. Now, the rest of this is all straight lines, but we want that to snap into the center section. So I am going to zoom in a little bit here just so I can see a little better. And, then you've got to decide, do you really need 2 lines here? No, I would just make 1 line. And on this, if you want a perfectly straight line, you could do the snap to option, but, if you just line it up so that that line is straight when you release it, you've got a straight line. And some of these are going to start to angle out. See, as I click on these, near these nodes, do you see them start to kind of like that whole line starts to kind of snap to? If you watch this one. See how that line highlighted? Just a little bit. Because it's snapping to, and it's connecting those points. Okay, see if I start back here a little bit. I'm not quite touching that. See how it snapped to the line? It automatically snapped into place. And on this, since I'm a little bit off, I might want to undo that line and make sure that I get closer to that point. But that's what the snap to option means. So you have that option of, just snapping to these points, okay? and it'll automatically do it for you. I'm just going to kind of draw through these real quick. Do you guys have any questions while I do this?
I'm good.
You're good? Everybody's good?
Okay.
This part's pretty easy. Now, see, I missed that one because I'm so far back. And I'm going to undo, make sure I get a little bit closer. And I could copy, paste, and rotate, but, you know, at this point, it's just easier to draw these lines. They're just straight lines. And those little circles that are at the top of these, I'm going to ignore. If you wanted to, you could put maybe crystals at the top of each of these. You know, instead of trying to make a little thread loop, right? Okay, so there's what I've got so far. I've got, you know, this is all connected together because we use the snap to option. And I have to make a decision. You know, I'm going to have a thread jump in this stencil, which is okay. You know, it doesn't affect anything. Or, you know, I could be a little more creative with these leaves and begin bringing a petal or a stem down to connect them. Does that make sense? Like if you're going to use this for a stencil to quilt with, what's going to happen is this. If I, you know, do this center section, I'm going to have to stop and then jump over to here. So I'll be trimming threads. So it's kind of up to you. If you don't mind trimming threads, you know, that's fine. But these separated pieces, you know, just so you know, you have to, you know, trim your thread, or you're going to have to just, you know, clip that little, similar to embroidery, like jump over to those sections. So it's up to you. But if you really wanted to, you can make a stem coming down, and you can be as creative with these as you want. You know, you don't have to leave this as is. But, you know, it depends on what your preference is. To me, it doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't make that much work for me to, you know, create that little changeover or movement over to the next section. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, now here, you see where these flowers are here, this flower petal? It's not quite, like, to me, this dip in here is unnecessary. You know, that's from whoever drew the artwork. You know, they didn't get a nice smooth arc in here. Okay, so I'm going to ignore that dip. I'm going to make this one arc. And, you know, I'll go ahead and start that flower. But remember, when you draw, like if I start here, you know, I need to go over into this direction. Okay, now, if I go like this, I get a very short arc. But I can always come in here and I can make that arc larger. I can't always get it exactly how I want it, you know, but you can make that arc larger. Let me zoom in so you can see kind of what the controls are on this. Okay, so here's my arc. And the controls kind of disappear when we zoom in. Okay. See that there's only one point here, right? There's only that one point on this arc that gives me any control. Okay, just that one point. Right there. See that point? Okay, so when that happens, you know, I might not be able to get the arc the width that I want unless I do a two-step thing. You know, unless I go here, you know, left click, hold, and drag, and keep that straight, and then just left click, hold, and drag. Okay, and which is kind of how this person would have drawn that artwork, also like an illustrator. But if you notice, if you control your movement, you get that continuing arc. If you're not careful when you go to start and you kind of dip down you know, you might not get quite what you want. In this case, we might have to do like a little edit here because I'm not going to quite get that arc there. But before I make any commitments, you know, you want to come in here and see if you can arc that, or do you have to do 3 stages? And we can kind of arc this a little bit better. Okay, see there's a couple of different control nodes. There's the node here, the nodes on the end, right? There's this node, which controls kind of how this, you know, arcs, right? And there's this node here, which controls where it arcs. See what's happening? And, you know, from there, if you've gotten this one the way you want it, you know how to go on to that second one. You're just going to catch this node right here because you've got your snap twos on. You're going to come here, and then you do the same thing. You're going to go ahead and, you know, you're going to edit this. You know that you need to pull that a little bit. And there's my, you know, the more squared off rounded section where this piece will join. Okay, so that makes sense,
good.
right? Yeah, it's not using the tools here. These are the drawing tools. Before we've used blocks, we've used those different shapes, and you know we'll look at using feathers or making feathers using some of the shapes as well. Right now, we're just kind of freehand drawing this, and you know it's a good thing to practice. You know, you learn how to control those curves a little bit more. You know what you can do with the straight lines, and you learn how to make sure that everything is connected together. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this to my sketchbook, right? And when I look at my sketchbook, you know, right now I'm not really drawing a block, you know, although, you know, if I look, it's put it in the block. But you look, it's ignored it because these are all open. Okay? It's not really in the stencils either. So, you know, I'm going to have to look at how I deal with this. Okay, here's my quilt, you know, block, new block, serendipity block. We're going to look at all of these, but I want to add this to the sketchbook. And we'll go ahead and keep another copy. But because these are lines, you know, it's really kind of ignoring it to a certain extent at this point. It's ignoring this non-closed section. Okay? But, okay, so this is, you know, we've got our stencils going, and we're going to look at how to draw some of these other things. Like this would be pretty easy. When you look at these leaves, you know, they're pretty easy to draw, right? You know that you're going to go ahead and take your arc, and I would come down here, you know, snap into here, and, you know, the leaves are pretty easy to draw. You can see, you know, those arc very easily. So, you know, you've got this leaf now, and then you can even arc this, or if you don't quite like that being arced, you know, use a line. Oops, let me get rid of this. Just use a line. And if I save this to the sketchbook now and we look at the sketchbook, see, it's only keeping those closed ones. Okay? It's only keeping the closed ones. So just bear that in mind as you're drawing this, okay? If I look at in the applique, you know, it's got the closed sections that it's showing. In the color sections, you know, only those two things are going to be able to be used, right? So, you know, as you save this to a block, it's really only saving closed things. And you can see when I go back to Easy Draw, it has now wiped out all of my straight lines, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when we come into Easy Draw, and we go to block and new block, you know, easy block, you know, patch draw motif. Right now we're just in Easy Draw block. Okay, so we've got, when you look at all of these, here's your drawing board setup, convert your guide, the wreath maker, all of these tools we're actually going to unlock. Hold on, let me think for a second. My mind is jello today. We don't want to guides. Hold on one sec. I'm just going to grab and slap the blocks in here real quick. Okay, so there's my blocks that I've picked, right? Okay, when I go over to motifs, they're here. Okay, and it tells me I can't set it on this layer of the quilt. I've got to go over to layer 2 or layer 3. Okay, if I go to layer 2, it won't let me set these because they're basically lines. Oh, I guess it will. But it's going to treat it like it's an applique. See what's going on? It's treating it like it's an applique motif. Where if I go to layer 3 and I bring these over, see how it's treating it, even though it's saved as a motif, it's treating it as a stencil. So it depends on what layer I drop these onto. Like even this, because it was made in applique, will be treated like an applique unless I'm on layer 3. Okay, does that make more sense now?
Yes, it's the layer
Okay, so
that ties it to it, isn't it?
Right, it's a layer that's going to determine, like even if I go over to my blocks and I drag that and place it on layer 3, see how it now becomes a stencil?
Yes.
So it all depends on my layer, where if I drag it over here, it becomes like an applique patch. So when you go to do, like something like go to create your own thing, I kind of told you wrong at the beginning where, you can draw those lines. You really can't draw lines that don't close. But let me go back over to, I don't want to save this in our sketchbook. I'm going to go back over to the block library, okay? Oh, no, sorry, work on block. And I want a new block, new block, and we'll go with easy draw and patch. And the reason we want easy draw and patch is A, we get the applique, we get the easy draw. Okay, and that's going to give you my patch things. Okay, see, here's my draw and here's my patch tools, right? All right, so if I bring in an image, like the one that was here, I'm just going to kind of slap that in there and then we'll, just fit it, right? If I bring that in, these have to be changed in order for this to work. When I go to draw these, right? I can use the applique tools. Okay, I can come over here and I can use the applique tools. Or, I've got the same draw tools here. Here's easy draw, here's applique. I've got the same tools. So, I can draw my arcs, right? Well, they behave a little bit different here because I automatically have these little Bezier handles. Okay, where easy draw is going to behave a little differently. Easy draw is the one that's going to give you just, those little quickie little arc things, right? See the difference between, what I'm doing here and when I go over to applique. The lines remain in applique, but I have a few more options in applique that are available to me. Like I can draw these lines real quick and then use the handles here to edit them a little more accurately. And if you notice, even if I just click on the line in the applique tool, I can draw a little more quickly in here. Does that make sense? And even if you release it and it gets, strange, you've got these little handles that you can pull this around. What I don't necessarily...
That's in the applique. That's applique.
Right, that's in the applique. But if you notice, what I don't necessarily have here is I don't have the snap to here. I just don't have that snap to like I do in the drawing. Okay, so if my things are not, if they don't snap to, it's because I didn't snap them accurately into place. They're not going to automatically snap to in this applique section. Okay, the difference was before if I used that grid and the other one, I could snap it into place, right? It would automatically snap to. That option's not here right now on this. But what I've got, when I go over to color, see, because I didn't snap to, I'm not closed, that's what happened. So, well, I didn't actually draw those yet. Never mind. Let me draw these real quick. Hold on. I just want to get a closed shape. Okay, this is just going to be a little more touchy, but it's also a little easier to adjust. I mean, I literally can just drag these handles, and see, the length of the handle is going to determine the arc. Or I can just grab on the line here and drag it into place. And if I've got everything snapped to or closed, then, then I do have something that I can color in. I don't want to color it in. Now, see this square back here that's in color? That's because, see the square around here? That's actually a patch. I don't want that. I can just, I don't know if I can get rid of this or not. But I don't necessarily want, this patch right here. Let me go ahead and save it and see what it does. I added that to our sketchbook. And if I go into work on our quilts, let's work on our quilts. If I take it over to layer 3, I can still drag this and drop it as long as I'm on the right layer. But it's going to save it in a different spot. I was hoping I could just kind of drag and drop it over here, but no luck. Anyway, so even if I put it in the block, I can still do it. But I've got that big square around it, which I don't necessarily want. I want something like this, right? Let's go back to our block. I am not awake today. Okay, so, here's my applique section, right? And when I do the new block, and I did easy block, patch draw motif, easy patch, and patch draw, that's what gives me this thing. If I go into patch draw motif, you can see I automatically don't have that square. Does that make sense? I don't have that, like when I went into, if I go to block, new block, and I go to easy patch, see that square is automatically there?
Okay.
Where if I go into block, new block, patch draw motif, I don't have that automatic square. So, something to bear in mind, like if you are, let me just throw a shape in here real quick. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just go to my sketchbook. Okay, so when I go to color, see the color, there's nothing in the back. So really this is kind of like, I'm just making these shapes, but they have to be closed for a stencil. So that's what I did, but I don't have the patch draw on here. Let me go into my sketchbook, and when I saved it, here it saved it as a block, right? That's the one that we did, patch draw with, right? Here it saved it as a motif, like it's an applique. It won't save it to a stencil because it wasn't made in the program. Okay, so the difference is this. If I do, if I create it like this with that easy patch draw, I have the square around it, which, sometimes you might want that square, but most of the time you're probably not. But sometimes you might. Maybe you're going to, in the scope of since you're pouncing it, or you're going to have to mark it anyway, does the square really matter? You can ignore the square. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. But if you absolutely don't want the square, that's how you do it. You can see I get what looks like a little stencil here. Okay, see the little stencil here? It looks more like, it's trying to pretend it's stitching, see? Versus this, which is more solid. And this other one over here, which is more solid because it's a quilt block. Okay, do you see what's going on? Like if I look up here, the ones that, came in from the motif have dashed lines. The ones that came in from the quilt blocks have solid lines. But, it doesn't make much difference considering you're going to pounce this anyway. Well, where it makes a difference is when I go to print. Let me see, foundation templates. Hold on. Okay, it's just going to be my fabric arts there. Okay, where it's going to make a difference on the print is going to be this. Me get over to here. Hey, there you go, right click. Move it to the Stencils tab, right? And which means I can take all of these and move them. It's not going to make much difference, but there's my stencil, right? I just right clicked and moved it. And I'm on the wrong layer. Hold on. Okay, even if I save it in a block and I move it to the Stencils tab, what I get is still solid lines because it was made using a different thing. I probably have completely lost you guys, so let me go back here. Back to my blocks. Okay. This is saved without any background because it was made in patch draw motif. Okay, easy patch and patch draw give you some different options. Okay, they do give you different options. You have a little more control using that easy patch, but just so you are aware, you are going to have that square around it, but it's still an option that you could use. Easy patch motif is going to treat it kind of like you're making an applique, basically. But when these lines show up because you haven't put any color in them, they're going to look like they're dashed. Easy draw block and patch draw block, those are the same kind of things. This is kind of a combination of them. Those are for making blocks. So when you add something to a sketchbook that was made with any of those, what you get is these solid lines, right? Here's my blocks. This was, let me move this back over to my blocks, okay? I can take any of these and turn them into a quilting pattern, period, just by dragging it on the layer. The fact that I can right-click on any of these and move them or copy them, is just, kind of it's just kind of a bonus. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to open, to kind of show you, I'm going to go ahead and edit this. Okay, this was done, if you can see, it's done in Easy Draw. Okay, if I go to color, it's got all the color in it, and it's got this back section here, which is, my back square piece. Okay, but if I go to print this, it's going to print as a block, my foundation, my template for rotary cutting, it's going to print that way, right? Okay, so it's not going to print like a stencil. If I go to the stencils and I go to print this, block, foundation, templates, it's going to kind of be the same thing. But if I look at this block, okay, I've got the option to say quilting stencil, right? There's my quilting stencil. Okay, does that make sense so far? How to get your stencils printed? Where if I go here and I say, okay, let's go ahead and let's print my template. Print. I can still do the quilting stencil here, but, and I get the quilting stencil. So you can use anything as a stencil, just it doesn't always look like you would expect. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have probably totally lost you guys. But anyway.
No, it does.
Okay.
Does.
Anything in the program, no matter where it is, can be, in fact, turned into a stencil. And it comes down to like your print option, with the exception of the quilt. Okay. Like if I say, okay, let's print this. Here's my quilt, right? I'm not going to I can get the outline drawing, but obviously this is not going to be a stencil, right? So while you can save these into the blocks, ultimately any block, any of the motifs, or any of your stencils can be used, depending on what layer you put them on, anywhere on this quilt. Like, for example, if I take this circle wreath here, and I'm on layer 1, which is where I put my blocks, right? Okay, you can see what it says. It's can set motif on base layer quilt. Use quilt options to remove restriction. Okay, quilt options. Did say quilt, right? Image options. Let me see what it says. Hold on. All right, so let me see. I'm just looking for my restrictions, right? Setting blocks. Okay. Do not allow motifs to be set on layer 1. Well, if I remove that and go in here and set that on there, I can set that motif on that quilt. When this goes to print, obviously because it was made as a motif or a stencil with no color in it, I just have these blank things. But hey, I can use any of these if I want to do a quilt, right? And I have the option to take these and move them over to the blocks tab, right? So here it is in the blocks, right? Let me go back to my sketchbook. So if this is in my block, that means I can edit it, and I can apply color in this and turn it into a quilt block. I would lose my mind trying to cut out and sew those pieces unless I treated it like an applique, right? But,
Yes.
you can do that, if that makes sense. And truly, I would treat this at that point like an applique. But you can do it. So if you find a stencil that you think is really, really cool, you can make it whatever you want. See? There's my block. Okay, so does that make sense? I mean, there's a lot of versatility in here on what you can do, and where you can move things to, and what happens with them. When you go to print, like, for example, if I move this to, well, let's go edit this. If I really want this to be a little less obnoxious, well, I can do that. I can go over to the colors, and I can kind of pick, a base color for this, right? I'm going to use it for a stencil. I probably wouldn't stencil those necessarily, but, just make it, if you're going to use it like a stencil, right, you would make these. I could have just filled those real quickly, but how you get in your bad habits, right? Okay, so there's this. Let me go ahead and save it. And, you know, so here's this. That is actually kind of pretty in those colors. Let me move this over to my Stencils tab. Okay, so that's a little, you know, a little less obnoxious. You know what I mean? Like it's a little less obnoxious than all those colors if you're going to use it as a stencil. Because when I go over to layer 3, you know, I can just take this and I can place it right there. You know, I can change these so that I can shrink them down to size or shrink them up, make it a border. Okay, so that is kind of one of the things that's nice. Like I'm going to add a border here. I want one border. Let's make this bigger. All right, so, you know, what's nice is this. See my border? If I really want to kind of make this a little more maybe uniform with the pattern in here, I wouldn't necessarily want to use it as a stencil through the whole thing. I could do, you know, I could do where I'm placing, right? Let me go ahead and open this. Stencils. You know, I could come over here and treat this like a stencil and use this tool, shape it so that it fits the border, right? And stretch it out. Maybe halfway across. So it kind of matches, like it would make the quilt pattern that, or the quilt design that's going to put on this maybe match that block a little better. Does, you know, does that make a little more sense now why you might want to use a block?
Yeah.
Okay, so now to get back over to making a block. Okay, we're going to go back to our little work on block, and I'm going to make a new block. And I can still bring an image in. I've got this image in now, right? Did I pick the right one? Yeah, motif. Okay. All right, so there's my image that I've brought in. And, you know, and I can still treat this like an applique. The thing is here, though, I have to make some changes. Here, I have to make some changes. These individual lines are just not going to show up. Okay? So, you know, you've got these polygon tools, you've got the heart tools, you've got the circle tools, or the ellipse tools. You know, so it's up to you. Or you've got all of these drawing tools. And to me, you know, the Bezier Curve tool is actually pretty easy. You just kind of drag it. You want to edit it, you know, just click on it. You've got these neat little tools to edit, right? And that's going to give you a smoother curve, even though it doesn't necessarily match your image over much. It is going to give you a smoother curve. And these little arms here, the little levers, give you a lot more control on making things uniform. You just have to close everything up and make sure that you've closed them up. And you'll know as soon as you have them. So I'm just going to kind of draw these real quick. Because I can draw them, and I can come back and I can edit. And usually if you just draw them first, then you're more likely to get them all connected together. And then just adjust them. These arms control like the height and the direction of the curve. But you can come in and grab the line and bring it up. Same thing here. I can just kind of grab the line and bring it up. But these little arms are going to give me a little more fine-tuned control. Oops. And the height of these arms, like the length of these little, levers or arms, does control the size of that arc and the height of, that area. Okay, if I want to do, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Bertie, would it be easier to do it this way, or is this supposed to be an easier way of doing it instead of just going and making several little dots around the half circle?
Because we have like one section here, I mean, you could do a bunch of little circles if you wanted, or ovals to make that flower, like they did on that, the first stencil that we had, that one stencil. You could do it that way. But if you're bringing in an image like this would be harder to control. It would be harder to reshape those circles. And you could try it, but it would be a little bit harder. That's kind of why they include these tools. To me, this is pretty easy because I do have control. I've got control with these little levers here. So it's pretty quick and easy to do. I can just pull them. Even if I get something like this, it's just a matter of twisting that lever.
Okay.
But I think it would be harder you could draw a bunch of little circles and overlap them. But if you remember, you had that overlap on the circles. So you'd have the circles overlapping each other too. Like on your stencil.
Uh-huh.
The whole point of the stencil is, it's to let you print and then pounce, poke the holes in it and pounce the pattern onto your quilt. Or if you print it on like the disposable or wash away paper, you actually can just stick it on top of your quilt and stitch on top of it and it'll wash away, right?
Right.
So, it depends on how you're going to do it. But the problem I'm going to run into is these lines. I've got this here. I just can't get this decoration in here. Like these lines, unless I alter them a little bit. And that's easy enough to do. Let me go ahead and I'm going to make this flower real quick too. And I'm just going to kind of cut these down to a few instead of matching that up perfectly. What I can do is I can actually trick this, and it'll look like lines. It's going to be, what you decide you're going to do. And in most cases, you don't want to backtrack a lot anyway. So you'd be doing double lines down there anyway. Oops. And I am not on right there. I guess I was connected. I didn't think I was connected in there. Okay, so here's my second flower. Let me pull this out a little bit so it looks a little better, or the center, kind of. If I wanted to, I could make this a little more rounded so it just looks like a round center instead of trying to match those arcs. Okay, so here's a little center. Now, to get those lines.
I would do that. I think that would be better.
Yeah, instead of trying to match those arcs. Those little arcs kind of drive you crazy. But, okay, now on these lines, I'm going to zoom in because what you can do is trick this. You can use your line tool and you can trick this because you're going to draw a line up and a line down. Okay, and I'll leave that one a little bit wider, but, you can draw a line up because you're closing down here, right, and a line down closer. And the way you can tell is when you go into color.
I'm not seeing your screen move. I'm not seeing your screen move, Barney.
Are you guys, is everybody else seeing my screen?
It's kind of just...
No, I can see your screen okay.
I am.
Okay, you guys.
I can see the screen, but I can't see you doing anything.
Oh, that's not
maybe
good.
It's just mine. It's bogging down here.
Okay, can you see I'm in like the color section now with a little paintbrush?
No.
Okay. Hold on, let me see.
Let me refresh or whatever I can do. Let's see. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah, I could try to hit. Let me pause the video. Okay, can you see my pencil moving?
No.
Oh, okay. It's got to be. Can you guys, Barbara and Shirley?
Something on me, doesn't it? Okay.
Yes, I can see
I
it.
can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna go. kind of hope.
Now I can.
Now you can. Okay. So basically,
Now
what I'm
I can.
doing
Yeah,
here
now
is
I can. Okay.
I'm drawing a line, right? I'm just drawing the line up,
Okay.
and let me get out of the arc here. If I draw the line up, and I draw a line back, like you would do for quilting anyway, right?
Right.
That line's like right on top of each other. Look what happens. Okay, so this one I made wide, as you can see. Right. This one I separated, and this I put right on top of each other. And what I get is my line if I put them right on top of each other. Okay?
Okay.
So because it sees it as
it
a
thinks
closed.
it's closed.
Right. It thinks it's closed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this to our sketchbook now. And we'll go double check it just to make sure that it's going to see that line. See? It does see it. Okay, so that's the way you have to trick this program to make it a line. Because otherwise what you're going to get is this. You're going to have to do this. Make like a little wedge, right? But that line has to be on top of each other. And if we zoom in really, really close, it is literally a line on top of each other. But the program sees it as a closed area. So here's one of the other things, like this curve line, right? Of course, I'm going to use, Bezier Curve with this, right? And I'm going to come across and, go like this and draw another curve, right? And then I'm going to draw another curve down to here, right? So I've got, in effect, 3 sections here. When I click on this, it looks like 1 because I was in the same Bezier curve. So it's 1 line, and of course you're going to edit this, right? But if you edit, copy, edit, paste, you can take this line, instead of having to try to redraw it, if I can catch it, hold on, there we go. And, you can put it on top of this.
Okay.
Okay, so now, in effect, I've got a line. I'm a little bit off, okay? So, if you're a little bit off, you can zoom in if you want and, nudge it. Although the nudge does not go very gently, but let me zoom out a little bit so I can at least kind of see. You can kind of line this up. See, here's my line through you can kind of see when it's pretty much on top of each other. When you're out like this, that looks like a line, right? And the way to check it is if it shows up over here as a line. That's the only way to be sure before you hit save it.
Bernie, even if it was a little bit off, when you come to punch the holes and pounce it, you only have to, really punch the holes on one of the lines. Right. Right?
The only thing that if it's a little bit off that's going to bother is you. And like when you go to print this, right? I have got that stencil option, and you can see, it really pretty much, it's not going to bother you too much if it's off. You can see the 2 lines here, right?
No, because I'm probably not going to get it. I'm probably not going to get it right on the line anyway when I
right.
punch the holes in it. So yeah.
Right. So if you don't get them right on top of each other like this, and you're a little bit off like this, you're just going to go straight down that anyway. This you might want to think about, right? But what's going to happen when you're quilting is, okay, you're going to come around, you're going to go up and back, around, up and back, around, up and back. That's really what you're going to do with it. Okay? And if you're going to continue, it's the same thing. You're going to come up, you're going to come around, and you might do the leaves here and the leaves here, but then you're going to come back down to here. Okay, so if it's a little bit off, which you can see, it is a little bit, you can see the double dash here.
Mhm. Barely.
Right. But that's the only thing
barely.
that it's really going to affect. And, so that's how you trick the program into seeing lines. It's going to be the same thing like for these arcs up here, right? When I come up here,
Mhm.
I'll go ahead and just make this one arc and kind of just start this over and edit.
Well, I'm much more forgiving of myself than I used to be, so I think I could live with that.
Yeah, it's not going to bother me a whole lot either. And yeah, I'm thinking it would not bother me,
but I am now.
Right, I'm thinking in the scope of the amount of work to do, if it's a little bit off, I think I'll live, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so here's this, and, let me kind of tweak that a little bit. All right, so there's that, and, okay, do I want to try to trace this again? No, I'm just going to go copy, paste, grab this, and try to line up the V, right? That's going to be it. If I'm not perfectly on, who cares? I got my line. That's all I want is that line so I can put it on the stencil. That's it. So, that's really how simple it is. It doesn't even have to be like I draw this way and then come back and go that way. It doesn't even have to be that. It just has to be copied and pasted on top of each other and stuff. So that's how you make the lines in your stencils. And, so not everything has to be completely closed. Like, for example, like the stencil, like when we looked at, let me go ahead and save this. When we looked at our sketchbook and you look at this, that would drive me out of my ever-loving mind because it's a completely enclosed thing. How would you ever pick up and start the next section? Does that make sense? Although most of us, if we're going to freehand stencil, you're not, this is just going to be kind of for looking, you're just going to free motion stencil, right? But something like that, that kind of limits you if you can't make those lines. So to me, the lines were kind of important. Even if I had to stop and pick up and start over, I don't care. I'm more of the look that I want kind of person rather than that continuous, free motion quilting all the time. Some people don't like to stop and start because it leaves the little knots on the back. But, I figure that's what scissors are for, right? But I know I'm terrible. I'm not if you were a competitive quilter, the knots on the back are going to be a whole lot more important. Hitting trim on my sewing machine does not generally leave like just little tiny microscopic knots, right? A couple of washes and they're buried in the quilt in most cases anyway. So that's the difference. Like if you're in a competitive quilt, you wouldn't probably be using this anyway. You'd be, drawing your own stencils onto the quilt. But this is a nice thing to use if you want to, punch the holes in it. Most people sew over it with their sewing machine, and then you can repeat this, your motif all the way through the quilt. Or you can do what a lot of quilters do and buy the stuff that you can print on. Put it on top and just follow the lines and either tear it away and let it wash out. It's kind of like a wash away backing for like embroidery, right?
Right.
And, and to me, that's even easier, right? All you have to do is make sure that, like, personally baste it around where you want it to be or hand tack it or use the quilter safety pins to hold it in place. And when you go to sew it, start from the center out. And that way, you've got this held, and then this next section holds it. And then by the time you get to these pieces, this is pretty stable, and these are easy to smooth out to make sure that you get them where you want them. Okay? So you guys have any questions?
I'm good.
You're good?
No.
Judy, you good?
I'm glad to learn about the stencils because, I was really glad to learn about the stencils because, like I say, I think I told you I had those tops that my mom had left me, and I wanted to do some kind of neat stencils to go on there. So this is really I'm gonna experiment with this.
Well, you can turn
This is fun.
anything into a stencil, as you've seen, right? Let me go ahead and save this.
Right.
And yeah, I want to go ahead and keep another copy. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a new one. And we'll do this again.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to put a different image in, and I'm going to have to hunt this image, so hold on. No, I don't want to save it. All right, you guys get to see my messy hard drives here. I know I have stuff everywhere. I have all kinds of stuff on here. Okay. Okay, now, if you're doing a continuous line thing, right? I have to find the continuous line one because I actually have some of these which, you know, because I refer to a faux quilter. I'm hoping that they're in here. There we are. Okay, so if I have something like this, it's a continuous line, right? See, it's just a continuous line.
Right.
Okay. There's my line. Okay.
Right.
It's designed to pick up and, you know, when I'm quilting, right? It's designed to pick up and go. Now this would be, I'll give this one to you guys, and I would only do probably one of these before I started copying and pasting, right? As a matter of fact, right here is where I would probably stop, copy, paste, flip it, move it into position, right? Because it's really, this is, you know, this from, you know, from here to here, that section right there. Let me go get my little pencils. Okay, from here to here, if you look at this, this is all you have to draw, right? You're going to flip it, and then you've got to draw this little section here, right here. Maybe this, I guess. Looking to see. Yeah, you'd have to get from here over to here, right? So, all in all, you know, you only really have a few sections to draw on this. I certainly wouldn't draw the whole thing unless you really, really want to practice. But, you know, because you're going to be doing, you know, you're going to go into this applique, and you're going to be doing, you know, these lines, right? You're going to do the Bezier curve here, right? And, you know, I mean, you can do this. You just, you know, have to kind of wiggle that a little bit, and then you're going to have to edit this, right? This is going to be a little bit harder to edit, I think. You might have to do this in segments.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do that in segments and connect them together, right? So basically, you're going to do this little series of Bezier curves to get these pieces together, right? Because these aren't your normal shapes. Like, these aren't going to be feathers that you can draw and reshape. These are going to be things that you're going to have to, you know, draw and put together. Okay, when you get all the way over to here, after you've copied and pasted and put these all together, right? When you go to send this out, there will be nothing showing unless you copy, paste it, and put the whole thing on top of itself to close those lines. But this would be a stencil that you would use like on a border or sashing, right? Because it's a continuous line kind of thing. And, you know, those are a lot of the images you can get are continuous lines. There's, as a matter of fact, there's books out there that you can get, and they're continuous line. You can scan them in and use those pictures. And they are designed to be continuous lines so that you can continuously go and just keep joining, right? Or if you have a long arm machine like Rosa has a long arm, you know, she might want to print these stencils out. And they would be more continuous line because the long arm's a little bit different, right? But the way you'd have to do that is copy and paste on top of it. So anyway, so I kind of wanted to show you that.
Can you explain why?
Because it's got to be seen.
Why would you have to copy and paste?
Okay, see, it actually is showing my little line on there. But,
yeah.
let me do something. It is going to show the lines. Okay. All right. So always check, make sure your line's going to show up. This one is showing the lines. Okay, so you wouldn't have to copy and paste on top of these ones. Okay. And I don't know if it has to do with when something's closed or not closed on these, but, when we went into new block, we did the patch draw motif. Okay. So just double check and make sure when you go to color, make sure that line is showing up. But what happens is this. Hold on, let me get over. If I go to save this to my sketchbook, okay, it should go into the motif, right? Oh, it did. It saved this one with the line.
There it is.
Okay, so this one did save the line. But just double check because you don't want to, do all that work and then flip it over and have it be a blank block. Okay, that would be absolutely frustrating. Yeah, check as you go. Just go over, and the only way to do is go to color. If you see the lines there, you're good. But because we're basically it's in the applique drawing is what it is. So it thinks we're drawing applique patches. Okay.
Okay.
So just make sure that those lines show up. So anyway,
so you're not in tracing image.
I actually am. I brought it into. You have to bring in tracing image. You have to bring the image in here, and then to do like the stencils, you're going to come over to here, and it says applique. Okay. So it thinks you're trying to draw an applique. Okay. And on this, really you have no straight lines on this, so you're going to be using that arc tool. And, you're going to come up here and connect onto, hold on, let me go fade this image out a little bit so I can see. You're going to come in here and you're going to connect into the next piece and bring it up, right? And then connect to the next one. And, you're going to have to be careful because there's certain points you won't be able to get that arc, right? So, you're going to draw this and then maybe come in and edit, as you go, right? Just click on these and shape them the way you need them shaped.
Okay.
Okay.
And, so you can get those shaped in there pretty quick, right? And, you've always got zoom tools if you need to zoom in here because, you can, like, I'm looking at this and I would probably arc it a little less and let me zoom out so you can see what's going on. Okay, as I arc, right, this controls the height, but it also controls the angle or the direction of that line. Okay, so this will control the height and the direction. Does that make sense? So I can get like something like this a little more smooth, because you don't want to have, even if you're tracing it, you want this to be a smooth conversion, right?
Yes.
So, okay, now once you get like from here, you go up and you do this whole section here, right? Over to, I would look at this and, copy and paste and put that over there, as you go, copy and paste. Like I don't have to do, like all of this again, right? I don't have to duplicate my work. Here's this, edit, copy, edit, paste, flip, and just drag it over to here. Does that make sense? So instead of doing, all of the work, just make sure it's good once and copy and paste it. And, that'll
Could you look at
you a whole
color and see if it's there? Go into color and see if it's there.
They're still there so far.
Yeah.
And then, before you kind of close out of this, because my lines might show up, right? Save it to your sketchbook. Check your sketchbook. See?
There it is.
And it might just, it might be sometimes this does different things because of
I lost sound.
I did too.
Lost your sound, Bernie.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Now you can.
I have a different headset in because my other headset I ran over the plug on, and it wouldn't work anymore. This one has a mute button that if I'm not careful, I bump it, right? But, you know, always, like, better safe than sorry. Always double check because, you know, I can't even talk today. You've noticed as we go along here, sometimes the different programs cause, like the video thing does different things to the programs, right? But sometimes the programs behave the same way depending on what's running in the background. And I have Windows 8, which I have found to be a little bit frustrating with some programs.
I have heard that too.
Yeah.
Really?
I've heard that too.
So I have learned much more lately to be better safe than sorry because I've actually had, like, in the Digitizer program where I've completed a complete design, I go to save it and I know that it's saved, and then it's just gone. It's like the program functioned, but it wasn't really functioning. So, you know, and it's not just like on the digitizing program, but it is more on some of the graphics programs, which this would be a graphic type program. So if you have Windows 8, you know, just double check and make sure that everything's there. So, but anyway, so now you kind of, you know, understand how to do these blocks, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just new block, you know, patch draw motif, right? I don't really need the image anymore. Let me see if I can get rid of my image. Let's go over to trace image. And I guess we can just cut it down to nothing. See if I can just delete it from that point. I guess not. We'll just clip it down to nothing. Okay. So when I go, well, I guess that didn't work very well. Hold on.
Just delete it?
That's what I thought, you know. Let me see. Let me set the crop window. Click to crop the image, which I'm there. Crop values.
What about, is there something in edit?
You know what? I could just go like that,
Edit, delete?
actually. Nope.
Nothing.
Yep, they're not active. So I just basically lightened it out to 100%. But, okay, so if I want to do, you know, like feathers, right? Here are the little feathers, right? You know, I'm just going to, oh, hold on. I didn't want the heart. I want the feathers. Feather. And that has little fly outs too. So let me see what that gives me. All right, so there's my feather, right? There's one little thing. Okay, now, if you draw something and it's the perfect size, you know, you can take this and you've got this create a wreath from the segments, right? You know, number of clusters, see what that's doing, cluster spacing, you know, resize a cluster, okay? So I'm just going to go like that. Okay, so there's the little pieces, right? Okay, so that's the autofill. Okay, so I could still take each one of these and I can still move them around. Okay, I can rotate them as well, like 90, right? But I can also I can't put the minus on here like on the digitizing, but I didn't want 360. I wanted 180. Okay, so I have those options on the rotate, right? These are, you know, like, that's my size. This is going to be my width, okay? See? So, you know, I can quickly kind of adjust them here as well. Okay, this, I don't want to convert it to a guide. That's what we worked on when we did, you know, like those grids, like with the Dresden plates and stuff. That's a guide. Okay, I don't want to do that. But, I've got, let me get rid of this because the wreath thing comes in handy when you've got like the initial layout of how you want your wreath. And I'm terrible at wreaths, so I'm just giving you guys heads up. So there's my first little thing, and there's my second little piece to the wreath, right? Let me move it into place. Okay, there's my, the second section of the wreath, right? And since this is just going to be a stencil, I'm just going to put that right on top, right? So there's my two wreath pieces. Okay, it comes in handy if you've already built something and you say, number of clusters, okay, cluster spacing. You'll have to play with this, and there you go, okay? If you don't like that, go back and maybe decrease that cluster spacing. Okay, so you kind of get the gist of what that's doing, right? That would be an interesting stencil. Oh, you guys are way quiet now.
Looks like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Right. But, I was kind of being facetious because, this is what you would have to do. There you go. See?
Yeah.
But anyway, so.
Oh.
Right.
Okay, so you have this. That's an applique.
It technically is an applique. Technically. See each one of these pieces? Okay. Technically, right. Technically, it's an applique. Okay. But I use the wreath function on it, and but you guys get the point. This can become very complicated. You have a lot of different options with that wreath thing. Where the wreath thing kind of comes in handy, to me, I would lose my mind. I would probably, if you're going to do a feather, I would just piece by piece this, right, into position. And, if you have like some of the magazines or, if you bought a book on how to make feathers, copy and scan that picture in and lay it out if you want, And then, then you have, once you're comfortable with that, like I know there's a bazillion things out there with how to make these phenomenal feathers, and they give you all kinds of ideas. Okay, but it's still easier if you have some kind of template behind there, if you're going to do this, right? You get nice, even feathers. Or you can make sure that you have nice, even feathers by copy and pasting and using the rotate, like maybe you want to rotate it by, 4 degrees. Or, 10 degrees, right? And okay. And, or, whatever, at a certain point, you'll kind of know what your rotation's going to be, and you'll get a better feel for it, right? Like I'm a little bit maybe over-rotated here. But, that's kind of the nice start of a nice feather, and you can kind of come down and do the double feathers, right? But you get the idea. But this is where your feather tools are. Okay, where the array comes kind of in handy is, okay, here's your heart, right? There's my heart. Okay, well, what else do we have here? We've got a nice little oval. I can make a little circle, right? Let's see what's down here. Okay, I've got all these other nifty little shapes too, right? So you've got all kinds of neat little shapes. But, okay, you've got this. Let's make an array. And, we don't want 9 clusters. Maybe we just want 4 clusters or maybe 6 clusters, right? And, how close do you want them? Oh, we kind of want them together. And see, that's where that comes in handy. And it's a really useful tool, for applique and this, right? Because right now, if I save this, in my sketchbook, It's in the motifs. See? Oh, wow, it even saved that one. Okay. So, you know, play with these tools and get comfortable, because when we start our project, we're going to start with our block, our layout. We're going to put, you know, the color thread we want in there. You know, we're going to look at scanning our fabric in and using our own fabric, which is actually pretty easy. And, you know, we're going to make a complete project using all the tools we use or learn, plus some other ones. Like there's some really neat things that you can do with, you know, like the quilt itself, or like creating almost like a kaleidoscope type of effect. And we're going to look at, you know, some of that with images, right? I'm not a big print your own fabric kind of person. I think it's very expensive to do, number one. Number two, that they've come out with all kinds of fabric now that you can heat set, but, you know, if you're going to use it or if it's going to sit out, then, you know, the fabric that you've printed yourself is generally going to fade much more quickly than anything else in the market, because you just don't, you know, simply have the same inks that the fabric places would have, right? So I'm not a big print it yourself type of person, but, you know, we can look at what you can do with, you know, like a large print or a small print, and what that looks like when you take it to kind of a kaleidoscope effect. Do you guys have any questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, too.